All right, everybody. Today is a special day because it's Friday, and I'm pretty jazzed about the weekend, even though every day feels like a weekend, right? Either every day feels like a Monday or every day feels like a Saturday. I don't know. I have my neighbor's yard care here, so they have all of their buzzers on and fans and blowers and cutters and everything. So hopefully the audio is going to be okay. Let me just start out with a little bit of housekeeping. Again, it is April 3rd of 2020, and all month Pluralsight is free for everybody. So just go to my blog, jibberdobber.com/blog, and find my blog post. It's up towards the top about free April. And the reason why I want you to go there is because I'm hearing that some people are going to the regular sign up on Pluralsight and they're getting the normal 10-day free and not the full April free. So go to my blog, jibberjobber.com/blog, and you can get the right link there. Also, Monday, we will be on day 4, which is focusing on becoming a better listener. Funny course. I thought nobody would like it. Nobody would pay attention to it. Nobody would care. And apparently that's not true. There's a lot of people who need to become better listeners. So one of my philosophies with Pluralsight, especially as I first started, I didn't know how many courses I was going to do. I didn't know if I was going to do another course. And when I finished this one, was I going to do another course? And I just wasn't sure, if it was something I wanted to pursue or something that they would let me do. But one of my philosophies was when I had the opportunity to work on a course, I wanted to make sure that I gave it everything, right? So the phrase that was in my mind during this entire course development process for each individual course was leave everything out on the field, right? That means no matter whether I have a game tomorrow or a game next week or a game whenever, tonight I leave everything on the field. And that's how I did my courses. I wasn't thinking, hey, I'm going to do this one super duper fast just so I can move on to the next one. It was, what is the best that I can do for this course if it's my last course that I ever do? And so this morning I was going through the course, and I haven't gone through this course for years. I'm sure it's been years. And holy cow, did I leave it on the field. I went really, really in depth on personalities and personality assessments and stuff like that. And so I'll talk about that a little bit in the stream this morning. But I want to start with a couple of stories. So a few number of years ago, I don't remember how long it was, but I was meeting with a colleague and a friend, and this person was walking me through a new office space. I'd never been to this office, so it was new to me, and just showing me, here's this department, here's that department, here's our fridge, here's my desk, and whatever. And we had this shared colleague, and I had a lot of problems with our shared colleague. I didn't like our shared colleague. And I didn't think our shared colleague liked me at all. In fact, I was pretty sure that this shared colleague of ours hated me. And I came to that conclusion because of the way that he treated me. I mean, he was really rough, very rough. And I didn't feel appreciated, and I didn't feel nothing good did I feel from this person. And so anyways, as we're talking, going through this casual tour of the office, and we somehow got on the topic of our shared colleague, which I regret because I don't like talking bad about other people in this way. But somehow it came up, and we were talking, and I said, I think this was around the time that I was doing this course. And I said, what's interesting is I feel that this person hates me, but I've realized they don't hate me. That's just the way they are. That's the way they are to everybody. And it's not that I was defending this person or appreciating that, oh, great, that's how they're. It's just that I started to think, wait a minute, their personality and their actions and their reactions and however they're interacting with me isn't a reflection of whether they like or respect me at all. It's just that's how that person was. And it was a huge eye opener for me as I think about working with and communicating with and persuading other people, right? And so as I was going through this course in preparation, and again today when I watched it, the thing that really stuck out to me is that when we understand personalities, when we understand how and why people think and do and act the way they do, we can improve our relationship with them. And let me take it one step further. When we understand ourselves, right? When we understand why we tend to think the way we do, why we act and react the way we do, then maybe we can even start to like ourselves, right? Because I think sometimes we feel like we are to this or to that, and if only I was like this person, or if only I was like that person, and that's okay. Like I'm okay for personal growth and development and make yourself a better person. But I think I'm concerned that when we really beat ourselves up for being what our human nature is, and it can get to an unhealthy place. Okay, so actually, I'm going to tell three quick things. That was the first one. Second one, my wife and I had the opportunity to be mentors for a small youth group, probably about 12 or 14 kids. And they were like 12 and 13 years old. And it was 2 semesters of Shakespeare, right? And I didn't even know how to spell Shakespeare. Like, I know nothing about Shakespeare. I can watch the plays, not enjoy them, but I'll watch them. I don't understand what's going on. I don't get it. I don't understand the stories or anything. So anyways, we went through a training with all the other adult leaders that were going to have their own classes. And it was really cool. And one phrase that they said that just really stuck out at me was, because I was wondering, like, why are we using Shakespeare? Why is Shakespeare the vehicle for whatever we're trying to do in these 2 semesters? And one of the phrases that they said in that training came from a youth from years before who said something about, when we study Shakespeare, we study human nature. Like, Shakespeare is all about understanding the whys and hows of people. Why do people act this way? If you think about it, there's so much jealousy in Shakespeare, right? Like jealousy drives a lot of the murders and the actions and stuff like that. And so as we're reading these stories that Shakespeare, or whoever, right? Because there's a question about whether he even wrote a lot of the plays. As we're reading these stories, the question is, why are people doing the things that they're doing? And when you start to dig into it at that level, it's like, wow, this is really crazy profound. So this girl said, let's see, it was something like, understanding human nature is a superpower. Think about it. If you have the ability to understand the hows and whys of somebody else, why they do something, why they choose to act a certain way, why they think a certain way, that's a superpower. And we can really tap into this superpower. It really comes down to us being aware, right? And that actually goes into the emotional intelligence course that I did just a month or 2 ago, or 3, I don't remember. It was recently anyways. And we'll talk about that sometime this month. So, all right. So understanding human nature is a superpower, and it can be our superpower. And when we have this superpower, we can be much more effective as coworkers, colleagues, teammates, and leaders, etc. Okay. Third thing. Years ago, my wife and I read this book called Personalities Plus. This was my first entrance into the whole concept of personalities. I had heard like white personality and a red personality, like white's really chill and red is like probably fun-ish sometimes, but usually really intense, right? And then yellow personality, I think, is like, want to have a lot of fun, right? And so I never really understood it, didn't really buy into it. I didn't really pay attention to people. I mean, I was a teenager, right? So I didn't pay much attention. So anyways, later on, my wife and I are reading this book called Personalities Plus, and there's 4 personalities that they talk about. And they are sanguine, melancholy, choleric, and phlegmatic. So phlegmatic is like super laid back, and sanguine is super fun, and choleric is really bossy, like your red personality, and melancholy is like super organized. And I remember they used this analogy of the 4 personalities with toilet paper, which is really funny because March of 2020 was probably the great toilet paper month in the history of the world. So anyways, the idea was how each of these 4 personalities act or react to either having or not having toilet paper when they're stuck on the bathroom. And so it was like, oh, that's interesting. So, or when there's a house fire, like who's doing what when there's a house fire, right? What personalities do certain things. So this was like my first entrance into thinking about personalities and how it would really impact me and my relationships and stuff like that. One of the most important things that I got out of that early study was that your personality, like you're not stuck with your personality. Whatever, like if everybody's like, oh, they're so choleric or they're so red or whatever it is, like type A, type 1, type whatever you are categorized or classified as, that's not necessarily who and what you are for the rest of your life. Okay, so maybe that's kind of how you tend to be or tend to act. But if you don't like it and you really want to make some changes in your life, you can change them, right? It's not something that's really set in stone. The other thing that I thought was really important is that the learning that I got from that phase was that you're not broken, like just because you have a certain personality and other people have this other personality, it's not that one's necessarily better than the other, right? I found times in my marriage when my wife's strengths are really important to run our family and our household, and mine don't. I don't have those same strengths. And sometimes my strengths are better and more important to run our household and our family, right? And so just figure out what your strengths are and kind of play into those strengths. Those are some of the learnings that I got from that. So jumping into this course, which is, let me pull it up here real quick. It's titled Working and Communicating with Different Personalities. And throughout the course, I talked about 3 things. I want you to be able to work with these personalities, right? Because if you have somebody on your team that you think hates you, that can be miserable. Like you're going to hate going to work. You're going to hate doing projects. You're going to hate everything about that. And then now you've created in your mind this little toxic work environment, and they might not even hate you. They just might have really bad people skills. They might even love you and love everything that you bring to the table and really appreciate it. They just don't communicate it, right? And so, work with, communicate with, and persuade. Those are the 3 things that I'm talking about in this course. And so I broke it into 4 modules, and I'll be honest with you, it's pretty intense. Like I go really deep. When I talked about leaving it all on the field, when I was watching the course again this morning, I was like, holy cow, this is really, there's a lot of stuff. Like you got to turn all your other stuff off. You need to get your notes out and start taking notes and paying attention and maybe writing down some questions that come out of it, because I go pretty deep into the weeds on this one. So here's how the course is broken down. The first module is an introduction to the Myers-Briggs. Okay, so I talked about personalities plus with those 4 types. We talked about the color coding. There's another really popular one in the corporate world, which is the DISC assessment. Notice I said assessment, not test. Okay. So the DISC assessment is, it's another personality assessment. All of these things are really assessments. And if you talk to psychologists or anybody who works with these types of things, they tell you these are not tests. You're not getting tested to see what your personality is. These are just assessments. And the interesting thing is when you take the assessment can have an impact on how you answer the questions, which has an impact on what your results are, right? So if you're in a really bad mood, or something really bad just happened to you, you might answer the questions in through that lens, through a darker lens, and come out with kind of a yuckier personality. And so anyways, or a personality assessment. So anyways, just know that there's things that impact how you'll come out of these assessments. And don't think that like you take it once when you're 18 and then that's what you are for the rest of your life. Things change, right? Maybe when you took it, you were in a super good or super bad mood. So the reason why I chose Myers-Briggs is because it's just so common. There's a lot of controversy around it. You can go look online and, put in Myers-Briggs controversy or Myers-Briggs, whatever the word is, to figure out if people are complaining about it or what the weaknesses or whatever are. But in the workplace, it's really common. And I commonly hear people say things like, oh, I'm an INTJ. And I'm like, and someone else is like, oh, I'm an INTJ too. I'm an INTJ also. And I'm like, I don't even know what any of these things mean. The reason why I have a hard time with that is because there's 4 different categories, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And each of the categories have 2 different options. And so we are now at 16. There's a matrix of 16 different combinations of the I or E or S or N or F or T or J or whatever the other one is. I think it's a bit of the history. M stands for, M is the, I have it here in my notes here. Oh, M is, well, hello, duh. M is Myers and B is Briggs. So Myers, not a right or a wrong answer, okay? You're not answering these questions. Let me rephrase it. You're not trying to game the assessment. You're not trying to be like, oh, well, on a good day, or if I'm nice, or if I'm who I want to be. No, just go in with however you're feeling. Usually your first instinct of a response. Go ahead and put that. And as you go through it really honestly, then you should come up with a pretty good result for your Myers-Briggs. All right. So let me actually I'm going to skip towards the end of the course. So at the end of the course, actually at the very beginning, but also the end, I talk about this idea of what are the underlying questions that the assessment questions are after. And there's 4 categories of questions. So remember I said INTJ or INFJ or whatever. So what you have is the very first letter is either I or E, okay, introvert or extrovert. And the underlying question is, I think it's worded something about focusing inward or outward, right? The way that we describe introvert and extrovert today, like most people talk about introvert and extrovert, is how you recharge. Not whether you like to be around people or not, or whether you're okay to be around people or not, but like when you need to recharge, do you need to go be by yourself, which is an introvert, or do you need to go be with people and get energy with and from other people? And that would be an extrovert. And so, anyways, I'm not sure how well that correlates with the Myers-Briggs, but the first character of the 4 characters that you're going to get is, do you focus inward or outward? The second one is, how do I prefer, that's the word, how do I prefer to receive information? The third one is, how do I prefer to make decisions? Do I make decisions based on data? Or do I make decisions based on like feel and gut feel? And then the fourth one is, how do I live my outer life? And so those are kind of weird ways to, I don't really talk about how I live my outer life, right? But I go into that in the course, and that's really what the premise of the Myers-Briggs is, okay? So in the next module, I break down what any of the 16 results are, and this is where I go into the matrix. So I have 4x4, and it's interesting because actually it was really interesting going through this again. What I did was I got statistics on the most popular personality types. And I got statistics on the very least popular combination, right? The one that was most rare, I think it was like and it's based on US population. That's where the data came from. It was like 1% of the population has this particular personality type. And then the most popular, I think, had 14%. And so as I broke down on this matrix of all the different options, I showed the percentages of the popularity of each of them. And then somebody had put together one-word titles like protector or something along those lines. So when you go through the personality assessments and get your results, then you can go back to that matrix and see, okay, I kind of fit in average here, or I'm actually kind of weird because I'm in the 1 or 2% group. And that's interesting. This is like the title that this personality type has been given. And yeah, I could totally see that. So anyways, that's what we do in the second module. We break down those 16 different, and I'm telling you what, you guys, it's kind of like, it was pretty heavy, right? There's a lot of information to kind of pay attention to. So like I said, turn off your other stuff, start taking notes and try and figure out what you want. Part of the reason why you go through that is to understand yourself. Like, why do I think the way I think? Why do I, the third character, remember, is make decisions. Why do I prefer to make decisions that are way more fact-based or data-based? And why does this other person who I have to work with disregard data and they just want to go on gut feel, right? Why do I prefer to receive information this way and that other person prefers to receive information that way? So what I want you to do is understand yourself. Understand why you have these ideas and thoughts and ways that you take information in and ways you prefer to do things, and understand the people that you get to, not have to, but get to work with, whether it's people at work, whether it's customers, whether it's your family, whether it's your neighbors. I'll tell you what, I've used a lot of this stuff over the years dealing with what I would consider some difficult people. But once I realized, you know what, they don't hate me and they're not a jerk. That's just the way they are, you know? So, okay, I talked about how situations can impact your results. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was that there are not definites in your results. So I talk about a big E versus extrovert versus a little e, right? And so on one of the slides that I have in my course, instead of saying introvert or extrovert, there's actually a scale, right? And maybe you are a really strong introvert or you're a really strong extrovert, but what if you're an introvert right on the line or an extrovert right on the line, right? So one of the things I emphasize is that you gotta understand, just because someone says they're an I or an E doesn't mean that they are absolutely an I or an E. Maybe they're an I, but they definitely can tend to do E stuff, okay? So there's this sliding scale that we need to be okay with. All right, so there's an official site where you can take your Myers-Briggs, right, and get your results. I actually found 3 or 4 free sites and free assessments, and I listed them in the course. I don't remember what they are right now. I don't know if they're even around, the ones that I put in the course. So just go out and do like MBTI or Myers-Briggs free assessment, and you'll find them. Okay, I did it 3 or 4 times. I think I did it 4 times. And yeah, I did it 4 times. And the results were not consistent. So on all 4 results, I was a J. The last one was judge versus perceive. I was a J. And on 2 of the other results, I had 3 that were in common, but 1 was off. And 3 in common and 1 was off. And then in one of the results, I was 50-50. I did 2 on this score and 2 on that score. And so I kind of just averaged it out. But seeing that I was 50-50 or I was 75-25, that really pounded into me that sliding scale. And I was like, okay, I am definitely a strong J. But on this one, I can go either way. Like, I'm pretty cool either way. This one, I tend to be this way, but I'm kind of open and I can do this way also. So anyways, I thought that was really, really interesting. All right. one of the things I like about, we hate stereotyping, right? We hate stereotyping. We hate categorizing. We do it, but if somebody stereotypes us, we don't like it. And if somebody sticks us into a category that's either too big or too small, we tend to not like it because we're like, yeah, but what about that? So one of the things I got out of this course is that we like to label things, because when we label things, when we categorize, when we classify something, we can now put a name on it. And with that name, we can start to draw these assumptions and start to think, okay, well, this person is this personality or this tendency or whatever, and that means this and this and this, and it doesn't mean this and this and the other, right? And we like to do that because it helps us, with one word or one phrase, really understand all of this stuff, or the person as a whole, as opposed to trying to like talk a whole paragraph about them. There's good and bad about that, right? I think it's good because we can make some generalizations, and as we talk with other people, we can share that same language, and we can say, oh yeah, they're kind of like this. The bad, obviously, is that we can really go overboard, and we can overjudge, and we can overcategorize, and we can put them into a group of personalities, behaviors, thinking, whatever, and not give them any freedom. And then we're shocked because we thought they were this way, but hey, look, they reacted differently over here. So I think it's good that we use labels, and it's good that we kind of figure out how to categorize people, but we can't have these be absolute boundaries, right? For them, because maybe they're working on changing, whether it's improving or not, but they're working on changing. And for us, like we don't want to be tied down into something and known as something. I remember when I was an intern, I was doing web development back in, I think it was the 1900s. I think it was 1999. I was working on an intranet website, and it was really cool. So 1900s, I did not take a horse to work. I actually drove a car. And so anyways, I was an intern there, and there was another guy there that was an intern who had been an intern, and then now he was in a professional capacity. And we were talking about this dynamic of being an intern and then getting hired on full time. And he said, when you start off as an intern, and these internships were long, I was there for 1.5 years, and everybody knew me as the intern, right? So when you start off as an intern and you transition into full time, you're really always the intern. Just because you transition into full time doesn't mean that people are gonna think, oh, that's a full-time person, I'm going to treat them differently now. They're like, oh, Jason the intern, right? Because that's what you were for 18 months. And I think the same thing goes with these personality assessments where, when you're 18 or 28 or 38, you have certain life circumstances, right? You have financial circumstances, you have career circumstances. Man, when I was in school, I was up at 6 a.m. and I would go to school and go to work and come home at 10 o'clock at night. And that was my day. I was so tired, right? I'm a different person now because I don't have to get up at 6 a.m. So anyways, things change. Let those changes happen. Use these labels and stuff to talk about people, but don't make them really absolute boundaries. Okay. One other thing that I noted was towards the end is that when you figure all this stuff out, like, you go through it and you figure out what you are and you figure out what your coworkers are. And of course, you're being gentle with that. You're not like pigeonholing them into whatever that personality says they are. I would suggest that as you communicate this to people, you don't communicate with your 4 letters, or you don't say, I am a this, and then assume that everybody knows that. I think it's more helpful when we tell people, yeah, I actually tend to make decisions this way. All right. I really like to get all of the information before I make a decision. Or, yeah, I like to talk to a lot of people and kind of understand where everybody's at. Right. And so I would suggest that instead of using what I call jargon, where you say, I am a this, and then assume that everybody knows what that means, I would just take a few seconds longer. It doesn't take long. Take a few seconds longer and just explain Yeah, so here's kind of how I tend to think, work, do, receive information, whatever. And that sets up some expectations to help them know how they can best work with you, right? And as you are working with other people, don't think of them as the INTJ, blah, 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 whatever alphabet soup. Just realize that, John really likes to work this way. And Jenny, John wants emails all the time. Jenny wants phone calls, or she wants in-person meetings. She wants face-to-face eyeball time, right? And so I think that's one of the bigger takeaways for me, is to not allow those stereotypes to define everything, but to just really start to understand how to best work with and persuade those people. So anyways, that's it. So the course is working and communicating with different personalities. If you don't have your free Pluralsight for April, just go to jibberjabber.com/blog and find the blog post where you have a link to go right to the right sign up form to get the free account. On Monday at 10 Mountain Time, so same time. I don't know where you guys are right now. I know there's people from around the world, but 10 o'clock Mountain Time in the US, we're going to talk about one of my favorite courses, which is becoming a better listener. Fascinating conversation. I'll tell you the backstory on that on Monday, if I remember. Let me just go real quick over to the question. Jose says, do you have any recommendation for active listening when you're overwhelmed with information, because clearly the person is sharing a lot of information that expects you to be aware of? So actually, it's kind of funny, because if I look at my notes here, the second letter is either S or N, and it is how you prefer to receive information. And so, Jose, I'm guessing that the person that's communicating this massive amount of probably over detailed information prefers to receive a ton of information, and you don't. Like, maybe you want more summary and more executive level and more conclusion, where they want to see more raw data and go deep down. And so the interesting thing about working and communicating with different personalities is they're taking what they prefer and how they prefer to receive information and projecting that on you. And for you, that's overwhelming, right? So tying your question into this, because we can answer your question also on Monday about active listening, I think it would be important for you to just differentiate between those two preferences of how you want to receive information, and be okay with it. Like, you need to be okay that they want to dump a ton and you want to receive information, for example, at the executive level. So be okay with that, right? The next thing is I would say, you not say this out loud first, but figure it out for yourself. How do you want to receive this information? Like, what is the stuff that's most important to you? Because once you get that, I think you'll be able to communicate back to them and say, man, this is a lot of stuff. It's great information. I don't have the bandwidth to go through this, with the fine tooth comb or do all the analysis or whatever. Here are my questions. And if you can give them, 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or however many questions, but very specific questions that they can go through and answer the questions from their own data analysis, and now they can give you the information that in a way that you want. So that's how I would handle that. As far as active listening, I think that might be the wrong question. We'll talk a lot about active listening on Monday in a couple of days. Let me just think real quick how I would use active listening. Okay. So sometimes active listening is called reflective listening. And the idea behind active listening is that you say something like, and Tom's on here. Hey, Tom from New Jersey. So, hey, Tom, thank you for all of this information. What I'm hearing or what I'm getting from you is that you've done a lot of research and you've looked at this from a lot of different angles, and we can really get a lot of draw a lot of conclusions from this data, right? So part of active listening is that you're receiving and you're kind of summarizing and sending it back. Okay. And so when you do that, you're acknowledging Tom's work. You're not discounting it at all, because people hate to feel discounted, right? So you're acknowledging Tom's work and the message that he's giving to you when you reflect that back. And then I would go back and say, here are my main questions that I'm trying to understand before I can really dig deeper into this. Help me understand at an executive level this, and this conclusion. And I think that's how I would use active listening or reflective listening. But anyways, Jose, I hope that helps. Tom says, exactly. Some are data dumpers, thinking you'd need all the data to make a decision. I used to be one of those. Isn't that funny? How we change? I mean, sometimes I don't know. I love the idea that our personality assessment results can be fluid. And sometimes that's based on, like I said, circumstances, moods. Other times it's based on like, what? I want to be more like this. And so anyways, if you have any other questions, throw them into the live chat. Otherwise, we're going to wrap up here in just a minute. If you go to my Jibber Jobber page on YouTube, which is just click on the the little Jibber Jobber down below this video, you'll see the last 2 videos that we did. And I'm doing this every day, Monday through Friday, through the month of April, partially just to kind of bring awareness to what my courses are on the topics of soft skills and professional development, kind of a book review type thing. And I want to help you take advantage of the free Pluralsight. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks for coming, you guys.